Chapter 12. Observations. The rest of the cruise breezed by. We spent the next day on the island of Barbados at a beach called the Boatyard. $15 got us in and included a beach chair, umbrella, and a free cup of fruit juice. We started the morning going scuba diving with the sea turtles and videoed with my underwater camera. The rest of our time was spent swimming and relaxing on the beach under the umbrella. We brought books and read for a bit, then we fell asleep for a while, making me grateful for the umbrella. Without it, we would have gone back to the ship completely fried. When we woke, the beach was filling with fellow tourists from the ship, and I was glad we had gotten there early. Natives walked along the beach selling jewelry, and I bought a turtle bracelet for Katia, as well as a necklace for Kate. We decided that we would leave soon, but for a short while we people watched. Many of the native men looked like Bob Marley, most of them donning hair longer than the women. The citizens of Barbados spoke English, but at times it sounded like a completely different language. When I had asked the scuba diving guide about it earlier, he said it was island slang. I guess if a person stayed on the island for a while, they would eventually pick it up. To my left, there was a lady a few chairs down from us, sunning and reading, holding a cigarette between the fingers of her free hand. She was a bleached blonde. The lines and wrinkles marring her face and body looked like they were the result of too many years in the sun, and I was sure she was younger than she looked. I tried to see the cover of her book, but I couldn't. Catching me staring, she smiled widely and winked before getting up and walking toward the water. She looked sickly and thin, like she had partied hard for too many years. As Katia and I got up and packed our things, a man approached us, trying to sell us aloe vera gel that he had extracted and squeezed into a pint-sized rum bottle. I politely told him we were not interested, and he moved on to the next person, only to have a policeman escort him off the beach because he did not have a permit to sell there. On our way out, we spotted the man by the exit, and Katia slipped him a $5 bill, earning a big toothy grin from him. Smiling, I shook my head and draped an arm around her as we walked to the taxi area. I said, "You just could not resist, could you?" To which she replied, "He was an enterprising man, which is better than doing nothing." My girl grew wiser by the day. In St. Kitts, the following day, we took another tour bus. In St. Lucia and St. Martin's, we did more sightseeing and shopping. It was a good thing we brought 2 large suitcases and packed light. It was the only way we would get everything home. On the final night of the cruise, we decided to order room service for dinner and watch the movie Somewhere in Time on my laptop in Katia's room. It had always been her favorite movie, but this was the first time I had ever watched it. I had always thought Jane Seymour was beautiful, and any movie she starred in was okay by me. The story was about a playwright who sees a photograph of a beautiful woman hanging in the hotel where he is staying and falls madly in love with her. Then, through self-hypnosis, he travels back in time to be with her. Katia had always told me how romantic it was, and since she loved it so much, I bought the movie for her before we came on the cruise. She'd saved it to watch on the ship, and she was right. It was romantic, tragically romantic. The full day finally caught up with Katia. She was so tired she fell asleep with her head against my shoulder. Turning off the movie, I tucked her into bed, kissed her brow, and whispered good night. As soon as my head hit my own pillow, I was asleep. The next morning, we left the ship and stood in line with our luggage, waiting to get through customs. Cara and her daughter were standing in another line and caught us just as we'd exited and were about to cross the street. We were going to leave our luggage at the hotel until we could check in. Unfortunately, they were staying at the same hotel. I glanced at Katia, and she quickly smiled. Again, it was not a real smile, but I gave her a look that said I understood. We only had 2 days in San Juan, and I was not about to let them intrude upon our time together. After spending the morning with Kara and Shaylee tagging along with us everywhere, and Kara trying to attach herself to me at every opportunity, we checked in and were heading up to our suite when I finally told her that it had been fun getting to know her, but the rest of the time would be mine and Katya's. While the girls took a moment to say goodbye to each other, Kara pulled a piece of paper from her purse, scribbled down her contact info, and handed it to me. "Call me sometime," she said, before brushing her lips against my cheek. I smiled and we parted ways. Watching them exit the elevator 2 floors beneath ours, I felt as if a large weight had been lifted. Katya's soft sigh of relief echoed my thoughts. We put our things in our room, took an hour to rest up, then headed out to see the sights of historic San Juan. That night, before going to bed, Katya said, "Angelo, when we get home, I would like to get a drum set." Chapter 13. Suffering from the Same Sickness. I had a great time tonight. I did too. We should get together again sometime. Sure, I'll call you. She kissed my cheek and went into the house. As I drove off, I realized I always give the same response. I'll call you, but I never did. Over the past few years, Katya had encouraged me to start dating, and I did date here and there, but my heart was never in it. I could say I hadn't the faintest idea why, but that wouldn't be entirely truthful, because somewhere deep down, I did. Katya told me it was because of Suzanne. She said she wasn't going to stand by and allow me to be broken. I told her she was one to talk. She was 19 now, and I could count the number of times she had dated on one hand. She said maybe she was broken too. The truth was I had absolutely no desire to date, and I was totally content with spending my free time with Katya. I was used to it. It was comfortable. I knew that when I got home, Katya would be waiting. She always was. Her eyes would light up when I walked through the door, and she would immediately ask me how my date went. Our conversations always went the same way. She would ask, "How was your date?" I would answer, "It was all right." Next, she would ask, "What did you do?" Then I would tell her. Usually, it was dinner and a movie. This was what I termed the safe date. Katya always smiled, but it was not her real smile. It was her masking smile. There was something behind that smile I had yet to glimpse, and oh, how I longed to discover it, to see what that curved mouth and those slightly dimpled cheeks concealed. Hurrying home, I did my best to stay within the speed limit. I didn't know why I was always so anxious to get home. Maybe it was because I knew Katya would be waiting for me, or because I just needed to see her to make the night complete. But when I got home, she wasn't waiting. The house felt empty. "Katya?" I called, moving through the house. "Katusha?" I looked everywhere. She was not home. She wasn't there, and I felt hurt, even a little angry, but I quickly put myself in check and sent up a silent plea to God for forgiveness for the small moment of bitterness. It was not Katya's job to wait up for me. She was 19, a grown woman with her own life. Why should she be there just to feed my ego? Maybe she's out on a date. Sighing, I sat on a stool at the kitchen counter. Maybe the reason I felt this way was because for so long I was her life, just as she was mine, and I didn't want to lose that. I didn't want to lose her. Oh, heaven help me, what is wrong with me? Not wanting Katya to walk in and find me waiting like a prison warden, I went upstairs and changed into a t-shirt and some denim shorts. I thought about getting into bed, but it was only 9 and I couldn't go to bed until she was home. But I needed to do something. I needed to talk. Grabbing my cell, I dialed Sylvia's number. She answered on the first ring. Hi, are you busy? No, why? I need to talk. After a brief pause, she said, I'll be right over. Sylvia and I sat out on the back patio. There was a full moon out, illuminating everything around us. I could feel her looking at me, waiting for me to say something. So, did you really want to talk, or did you just want some silent company? Taking in her deadpan expression, I smiled. Sylvia was always one to say what needed to be said. She never beat around the bush about anything. So rather than carefully thinking over my words, I said exactly what was in my head. I think there's something wrong with me. How do you mean? I didn't stumble over it. I plunged straight ahead. All right, I went out on a date tonight, my 6th or 7th in the last 3 years. As usual, the woman was nice and I had an okay time, but that's just it. It's always an okay time. I can never enjoy myself because I always spend the entire date looking forward to it being over so I can get back home. I wouldn't even go out, but Katya is always encouraging me to, yet she rarely goes out herself. She's always been home waiting for me when I return, but tonight she wasn't, and I was a little angry and hurt. I mean, what's wrong with me? How can I feel this way? Why do I feel so, possessive? She is not a little girl anymore. She has a life, and I can't be a part of it. And that's what hurts most of all. I don't understand it. I don't understand me. Sylvia sat forward in her chair and laced her fingers together. Even in the dim light, I could see the signs of arthritis in them. You're right. She's not a little girl anymore, and she does have a life. So why is it so hard for me to accept that? When I think about her leaving one day, and she will leave, to make her own life without me, I feel ill, and I have to push it from my mind. Why? There has to be something wired wrong inside my head. There's nothing wrong with you, Angelo. Simply put, you're in love with her. Startled by her words, I jump up from my chair and begin to pace, my brain automatically brandishing my weapon of heated denial. How could she say something like that to me? You're crazy. I can't be. I'm an old man. Sylvia laughed. Angelo, I hardly think 38 is old. I guess you think I'm ancient then. You know what I mean, I practically growled, ignoring her attempt to lighten the subject. I hated the frustration ringing in my voice, but I couldn't allow my thoughts to go there. I'm an old man in her eyes. Even thinking something like that would be like a dirty joke. At least others would see it that way. But you are in love with her. I'm too old. I raised her. I'm like a parent to her. Angelo, the bond you and Katya share has always been far beyond a parent-child relationship. What? What are you? Calm down. I didn't mean it like that. She eyed me for a moment. What I mean is you were her friend, her nurturer, her caretaker and protector. You were her teacher and guide through those tender years. She depended on you for the unconditional love you gave her, even when Suzanne was here. From the moment you found her in that apartment sitting with her mother's body, it's always been you. When things got bad between you and Suzanne, Katya was your reason for going on, and your very existence was because of her needing you. You became everything to each other because each other was all you had. I've watched you with her for years, and I knew when she grew up, things would change. Sitting back down, I released the breath I'd been holding and pushed a hand through my hair, raking it back from my face. It just feels wrong somehow. It's ludicrous, isn't it? But you admit that you do love her. I can't love her, Sylvia. I wouldn't be good for her. I wouldn't be good for her. What would people think? Since when have you ever worried about what other people think? She should be with someone her own age. Is that what you really want? I rubbed the rough hand over my face. I just want her to be happy. And you don't think you can make her happy? I don't know. At the moment, just thinking about Katya being with someone else was more than I could take. As much as I hated to admit it, I was actually glad she never went out. It meant that she was still mine. Looking back on the few dates that she had been on in the past year, I clearly remembered the dull ache that had grown inside me each time she left. And the last time she went out, I could barely concentrate on anything and had spent a good part of the evening pacing the floor. At the time, I didn't fully understand it. Reading my thoughts on my face, Sylvia said, "It would kill you to see her with someone else because you love her." Realizing it was pointless to deny it any longer, a slow, sad smile curved my lips. With everything that I am. All right, there, I've said it. But I can't tell her. She is still so young, and I cannot risk driving her away. I could never forgive myself if that happened. Besides, she could never feel that way about me. She's probably tired of me already. She isn't even here tonight, and she has always waited up for me. It just isn't the same anymore. A sudden sadness spilled over me with that thought. No, it isn't the same. It can't be. You're both consenting adults now. You can choose whether you want to be together or not. I told you she doesn't have those feelings for me. How could she? Sylvia turned in her chair, facing me fully, her expression indiscernible. Katya didn't happen to mention that we had lunch today, did she? No, I said, surprised. She didn't. I didn't think so. You two are more alike than you know. You say she hardly ever dates, huh? I want you to take a moment and think about that. She's a beautiful woman, and I'm sure she has no problem attracting men. But ask yourself this question. Why would a woman want to go out with other men when the one who holds her heart is already there? My heart began to pound as emotion lodged in my throat. What do you mean? What I am saying is you and Katya have been suffering from the same blinding illness. You love each other. But how could? For you, I think it's a more recent development, at least in the last year. For Katya, I believe it started when she was 16. What? That's crazy. Is it? Why? Because 16 is rather young. How could she have those kinds of feelings back then? Do you remember telling me about the cruise? Of course, I remember. It was wonderful and would have been the perfect vacation if not for that woman. I stopped speaking as my thoughts traveled back to Kara's unwanted attention. I remembered worrying about Katya because she wasn't herself part of the time, usually when Kara and her daughter were with us. Mamma mia, I muttered, smacking my palm against my forehead. I had no idea, I whispered. How did I not see it? Because you were in parenting mode, and Katya has always been good at schooling her emotions. I was hurting her, and I didn't even know it. She was hurting, yes, but not because of you. She felt jealous and possessive and protective of you. She had some idea at the time that her feelings were changing, but I don't think she really understood how much. Sylvia squeezed my hand. She loves you, Angelo, with heart, she loves you, but she needs some time. You both need time to learn to be without each other for a while." She paused. "Now don't be upset with me, but I have a beachside condo up in Nag's Head. I offered to let her stay there for a bit, just to give her some time. She said she would like to stay for a couple of months. She plans to leave this weekend." Her words were a blow to my heart. Katya was leaving. We would be apart for 2 months, 2 very long months. I understood her need for time away, but the thought of not being with her, especially now that I had acknowledged my true feelings for her, hurt like hell. But I would wait for her. I would give her the time she needed and wait for her to come back to me. "I don't understand how this is happening," I whispered. "I think it is happening because it was supposed to. But don't question it. Just leave it in the Lord's hands." It was a little before midnight when Katya got home. I was still up. I couldn't have slept if I tried, not until she was home. I met her in the upstairs hallway. We stood looking at each other, neither of us seeming to know what to say. I knew what I wanted to say, but I was afraid. Then something subtle happened, like the gradual lighting of a room. What I had been seeking for so long, appeared. The blinders were off, the mutual mask stripped away, and what I had only glimpsed for years was lying naked before me, and I was amazed. I finally spoke first. I talked to Sylvia. "Oh." She closed her eyes and turned away from me. She was trembling. "I had called her earlier," I said, not wanting her to think Sylvia betrayed a confidence, "because I needed to talk." Slowly, I moved closer and gently took her shoulders in my hands, turning her around. I lifted her chin, urging her to look at me. There were tears in her eyes. I pressed my lips to each closed lid and then her cheeks, gently kissing them away. I felt her shudder, felt the warm puff of air escape her as she exhaled. When I spoke again, my voice was rough with emotion. "Katya, Dolceza, I understand why you must leave. Take all the time you need, but know that I will be here waiting for you." I drew her into my arms and she melted against me. My heart was pounding like mad, and I was sure she could feel it. Her hands moved up my back, and she held me tighter. Neither of us spoke again. We simply stood there, locked in an emotional embrace. I never wanted to let her go. I held her close. I could hold her close to me forever.